Welcome to the Human Meme Podcast. I'm David Bowles, and today we're going to examine what it means to find great success, only to end up mocked in the end. From genius to joke. I want you to think about the last time you encountered an achievement that seemed too large for the person who produced it. Something that made you pause, narrow your eyes, and reach for the comfortable explanation. Maybe it was a historical figure whose story sounded exaggerated. Maybe it was a living person whose accomplishment struck you as implausible given what you thought you knew about their background, their body, their circumstances. You felt a flicker. A small, quiet impulse that said, "That cannot be right." That flicker is where this episode starts. A teenager on TikTok declared Helen Keller a fraud, and watching the video twice I recognized what was happening. Because the same performance had been aimed at Shakespeare by people who believed a glove maker's son could not have written the plays, and at the Apollo astronauts by people who believed 3 men could not have flown to the moon. The teenager on TikTok was performing a ritual the culture has been running for centuries, and the teenager did not know it. That recognition is where my new book begins. It is called From Genius to Joke: How We Betray the People We Should Remember, and it is published by David Bowles Books. Available now wherever books are sold. The book identifies a mechanism, a recurring 5-stage process that operates across centuries, across disciplines, across national boundaries: achievement, overpersonalization, vulnerability, reduction, cost. A person produces work of genuine stature. The culture turns the achiever into a character simpler and more legible than the actual person. A vulnerability appears or is found. The culture uses that vulnerability to collapse the full career into a single image, and the cost accumulates invisibly in the work that was never produced because the next generation of potential achievers absorbed the lesson and decided the risk was too great. 8 paired chapters and 16 case studies carry the argument. Helen Keller and Laura Bridgman, Phyllis Wheatley and Shakespeare, Nikola Tesla and Ignaz Semmelweis, Hedy Lamarr and Emily du Châtelet, Orson Welles and Tennessee Williams, Robert Goddard and the Apollo 11 crew, Billie Holiday and Edith Piaf, Thomas Paine and W.E.B. Du Bois. What connects these 16 people across 2.5 centuries of history is a pattern so consistent that calling it coincidence requires ignoring the evidence. Helen Keller wrote 12 books, advocated for suffrage and labor rights, co-founded the ACLU, and received the Presidential Medal of Freedom. And the culture remembers a child at a water pump. Tesla's alternating current system powers every electrical grid on Earth, and the culture remembers a man feeding pigeons in a hotel room. Billie Holiday reshaped the art of jazz, singing so completely that every vocalist who followed her inherited what she established, and the culture remembers the mug shot and the deathbed handcuffs. Paine wrote the pamphlet that made American independence thinkable, and the republic he helped create could not be bothered to give him a grave. Each of these substitutions, the achievement replaced by the image, follows the same structural logic. The culture takes what it needs from the genius, extracts the contribution, absorbs it into the infrastructure of daily life, and then discards the contributor. Current still flows through Tesla's grids. Semmelweis's hand-washing protocol still governs every hospital ward on the planet. Common sense is still taught in schools. Every one of these contributions was kept. Every one of these contributors was thrown away. The trajectory of the book moves from the most personal forms of denial to the most systemic. It begins with the body, with ableism, the conviction that certain kinds of bodies cannot house certain kinds of minds. It moves through authorship and professional orthodoxy, through gendered invisibility, through the refusal to let genius age and change shape. And it arrives at conspiracy culture and state power, where a republic uses its radicals during the crisis and exiles them afterward. By the final chapter, the mechanism is operating at the level of the nation-state. Thomas Paine told Americans they did not need a king, and they called him a patriot. When he told them they did not need a church, they called him an infidel. W.E.B. Du Bois co-founded the NAACP, edited The Crisis for 24 years, and wrote The Souls of Black Folk, and the government responded by indicting him at the age of 83, revoking his passport, and treating his advocacy for peace as evidence of treason. He died in Accra, Ghana, on August 27, 1963. 250,000 people gathered on the National Mall the following day for the March on Washington. Du Bois, the man who laid the intellectual groundwork for that march, was being buried in Africa, while the movement he helped create reached its most visible moment. The book closes with an argument addressed to the reader rather than about the reader. Its claim is that the mechanism's greatest victims are invisible. Consider the person who saw what happened to Keller or Du Bois, made the rational calculation, chose safety, and left no manuscript, no patent, no song behind. That person had a comfortable career, published acceptable work, received appropriate honors, and retired without scandal. Nothing that person produced will be remembered in 200 years, and the reason is that the culture showed them, through the stories in this book, what happens to those who produce something that matters. How many ideas have been abandoned because the person who had them absorbed this lesson? How many arguments have been moderated because the thinker looked at the cost and decided the unmoderated version was too dangerous? Those questions are unanswerable, and their unanswerability is the point. The cost of genius denial is measured in absences, in the work that does not exist because the person who would have produced it decided rationally that the price of production was too high. You have read or will read these stories, you will know the mechanism, and the next time you encounter an achievement that exceeds your frame of reference, you will feel the flicker. You will feel the suspicion, the pull toward the comfortable explanation. What you do with that flicker is the only question that matters. The book is From Genius to Joke: How We Betray the People We Should Remember, published by David Bowles Books. It is available now at bowlesbooks.com, Amazon, and wherever books live. For the Human Meme Podcast, I'm David Bowles, wishing you a smart evening and a better remembered tomorrow. Thanks for listening. Be a human meme.